What is hidden in Winterfell Crypts? Yes, there are the statues, but is there something else there, something important? There are lots of theories, so let's take a look. Hi everyone, this is Robert. Welcome to Deep Geek. On this channel we dive deep into A Song of Ice and Fire, as well as The Lord of the Rings, The Witcher, and much more. Welcome. If you're watching this as part of the series on Winterfell, the Starks, and the Long Night, I did say last time that we would next cover what all those statues and dead Starks are down there waiting for, but having started writing that video I decided we actually needed to look at this topic first, because it's something the fandom have been debating for years, and impacts on how the crypts will be used in the rest of the story. Is there something hidden deep in the crypts, other than the statues which are hidden in plain sight? We never go to the bottom of the crypts in Winterfell in the books, mostly sticking to the topmost layer. That's where the Starks we know the name of are buried. Brandon and Lyanna, Ned's siblings, Rickard, his father, Cregan Stark, who we know from the Dance of the Dragons, Torrhen Stark, the king who knelt to Aegon the Conqueror, and so on. That first level is itself quite deep down. Ned and Robert have time to have a decent conversation on the way down the stairs about the size of the north, where all the people are, the weather there, the weather down south, the delights of Highgarden and Storm's End, and so on. Robert Baratheon is out of breath by the time they reach that first level, so quite deep. But we're told they go deeper over several levels, and each level is also massive. The vaults are described as cavernous, larger even than the castle above, which, when you consider the size of the castle, is very, very impressive. We have several stories of people or things being hid down there through history, and no one can find them, it's so big. If you've watched the earlier videos in the series, you'll know that I think that hidden in plain sight are those statues trapping the spirits of long-dead Starks in there. If that intrigues you, please do go and check out those earlier videos. But this time we will be looking at the possibility that there is something else down there that is equally plot important, or maybe there is more than one other thing. Let's start with something that's fun but doesn't seem likely. That there's a dragon down there, or dragon eggs. In Fire and Blood, Mushroom alleges that Vermax, Jacaerys' dragon, left a clutch of dragon's eggs at Winterfell. Might they have been stored down in the crypts, near those hot springs perhaps? As much as I hate agreeing with Archmaester Gildane, who wrote Fire and Blood, there is no evidence for this, either in contemporary accounts or the actions of the Starks later on, who would surely have known the value of those eggs. Might the hot springs under Winterfell be heated by a dragon at the bottom of the crypts? If so, it's a very long-lived dragon who doesn't make a sound or ever want to stretch its legs. Might the great winged snake whose roar was a river of flame that Bran saw over Winterfell through Summer's eyes at the end of A Clash of Kings be a literal dragon? Well, I guess if we're taking that literally, we should take the other things Summer sees in that paragraph literally too, like the stars being eaten. And besides, George R. R. Martin is on record as referring to this moment under signs and portents, rather than actual dragon sightings. For what it's worth, I suspect that any dragon-related signs and portents there are in Winterfell probably refer to Jon, the secret son of a dragon, rather than a literal dragon that's been there all this time and no one noticed. So although we don't have enough evidence to say definitively that there isn't a dragon or dragon eggs or anything like that down there, we also don't have any evidence that there is. And we have a compelling idea for what any dragon in Winterfell imagery might actually be referring to. Although, talking of Jon, the second set of hints George R. R. Martin presents us with about the crypts are to do with him. As early as Jon's 4th chapter in Book 1, he tells Sam that he dreams of Winterfell sometimes. And then I find myself in front of the door to the crypts. It's black inside, and I can see the steps spiralling down. Somehow, I know I have to go down there, but I don't want to. I'm afraid of what might be waiting for me. The old kings of winter are down there, sitting on their thrones with stone wolves at their feet and iron swords across their laps, but it's not them I'm afraid of. I scream that I'm not a Stark, that this isn't my place, but it's no good. I have to go anyway. So I start down. Jon comes back to this dream several times over the next few books, slowly getting further on in his dreams. The Kings of Winter do indeed tell him that he doesn't belong there, but still he has to go on. There's something there waiting for him. The working assumption among many fans, myself included, is that this is tied into his identity, because of course that is where Lyanna, his real mother, is buried, and she has a statue, which is extremely irregular. It's not completely unprecedented for a non-lord to get a statue, but she is the only woman we know who has a statue, and although Ned's reason for putting statues there for her and Brandon are sweet, because of his love for them, it's not really very convincing for someone who values his Stark heritage so highly. Surely other Stark lords loved their siblings too, but they never thought of making statues of them. Even if we might think it is understandable, it's clear that in Worlds everyone thinks it odd. Perhaps this is one of the things Lyanna made Ned promise, that she would have a statue, so that when Jon eventually found out his parentage, he would be able to see her face. And Ned decided that to just put up a statue of her but not his brother as well would be even more suspicious, so that's why they both got statues. Some have gone further and suggested that perhaps there is even evidence of Jon's parentage there, a marriage certificate perhaps, or Rhaegar's harp, because he loved that harp and seriously it just vanished from the narrative. Maybe, but in any event I think we can say that there is definitely something here. Jon will descend into the crypts at some point and discover something. Perhaps we will get a moment early in the Winds of Winter when his spirit or soul goes there and is turned back by the Kings of Winter because he isn't a Stark, or perhaps he will go there later to see the face of his true mother. There's actually a sort of oblique bit of foreshadowing for this in the legend of Bael the Bard, who captured the daughter of the Lord of Winterfell, leaving a blue winter rose on her bed, and escaped into the crypts with her. She emerged with a bastard child who inherited Winterfell. Rhaegar was a bard, and Lyanna the daughter of the Lord of Winterfell, and he gave her a crown of winter roses, and Jon, though raised a bastard, has been named rightful heir to Winterfell in Robb's will. There are a lot of echoes there. And I have to say, it would be an emotional moment for Jon to finally see his mother, or her statue. He spends so much of the story wondering who she is and why Ned never told him. But this would be a reason why he must go into the crypts. If some of the dreams he gets about the crypts are from Bloodraven, as some of us suspect, this would be yet another hint that Jon is who Bloodraven thinks is the prince that was promised. So that's two big plot issues focused in on the crypts, the statues and Jon's parentage. But could there be a third? That's quite a lot of focus on one place, but there is definitely a part of those crypts that we haven't covered that is particularly intriguing, the part that is inaccessible. As Theon says to Barbary Dustin, there are lower levels, older. The lowest level is partly collapsed, I hear. I have never been down there. This is odd. Overall, the crypts seem to be in remarkably good condition given how old they are, not damaged by age to the extent you might think. We don't read of the masonry crumbling, the stairs being worn, etc., and the statues themselves are still recognisable hundreds or even thousands of years later. Bran recognises Jon Stark, for example, who founded the Wolf's Den, where later would stand White Harbour. Well, we don't know exactly when he did that, but it was definitely a couple of thousand years or more ago, so his statue is a couple of thousand years or more old. Which all makes sense. This is the most Starkish of the Stark places, the heart of Winterfell. Of course they would keep it in good repair. What doesn't make sense is why some of it is collapsed. Why hadn't it been repaired? Presumably that section contains the tomb of Bran the Builder himself, the patriarch of House Stark. If there had been an accidental collapse, surely someone would have tried to reopen it. It appears not. Personally, I think the most likely reason is that it was collapsed intentionally, and left intentionally. Why? Well, this is where we get towards the bottom of the Winterfell Crypts fan theory iceberg, because you will find people wondering if this is where the dragon is, or the Night's King, or the Night's Queen, or lots of other things. So let's tread carefully, proceeding on the assumption that the Starks are, at the very least, happy for this part of the crypt to be closed off to them, and ask whether there might be any clues about something that could have happened in the first few hundred years or so of the Starks being in Winterfell that might lead them to prevent access to the earliest tombs and statues. As it happens, we do know of something that happened around that time. the legend of the Night's King and the Night's Queen. For show-only people, we should clarify that this is a very different character to the show's Night King. He was actually the 13th Lord Commander of the Night's Watch. We read that a woman was his downfall, a woman glimpsed from atop the wall, with skin as white as the moon and eyes like blue stars. Fearing nothing, he chased her and caught her and loved her, though her skin was cold as ice, and when he gave his seed to her, he gave his soul as well. He brought her back to the Night Fort and proclaimed her a queen and himself her king, and with strange sorceries he bound his sworn brothers to his will. For 13 years they had ruled, Night's King and his corpse queen, till finally the Stark of Winterfell and Joramun of the Wildlings had joined to free the Watch from bondage. After his fall, when it was found that he had been sacrificing to the others, all records of Night's King had been destroyed, his very name forbidden. He was a Stark, the brother of the man who brought him down. A grim legend, as told by Old Nan, so we probably shouldn't necessarily take it as literal truth, but the idea that there is a Stark whose very name is forbidden from around the time when the Stark tombs in the crypts were blocked off is an interesting coincidence, as is the clear link across here to the others. The Night's Queen had blue eyes and ice-cold skin, and they had been sacrificing to the others. If the Stark crypts are some kind of defence against the others, as we suspect, then might those Stark spirits and statues trapped in the crypts have been triggered into action somehow? Might that be why the section is now blocked off, because that part of the crypt is simply now empty? I think there's a very good chance of it, but that's the subject of the next video, so feel free to hold judgment on that. What are all those trapped Stark souls and statues that seem to be alive somehow waiting there for? For now, let's just acknowledge that although that may be the most significant part of the Winterfell Crypts plotline, there is at least one other thing down there that will be plot important. A dragon? No. But a chance for Jon the Ice Dragon to see his true mother's face? Definitely. But what do you think? Let me know in the comments below. If you enjoyed this video, you can find the link to the rest of the playlist on the left of your screen. Or to support this channel, thank you. There's a link to my Patreon page on the right of your screen. That's all for this time. Thanks for watching. I'll see you again soon.